And he also went on to say, God is constantly speaking, but the problem is we're not listening. He is constantly speaking to you. But the way you develop a sensitivity to the Holy Spirit is to obey the Holy Spirit. When you give expression to the impression, all of a sudden things begin to happen. And anything significant I've seen happen in our ministry and in our life is because we just said yes to the Holy Spirit. We just obeyed what the Spirit of God was saying and doing, even though in the natural, it didn't make sense. Who would have ever thought in 1999 that we would do this massive prayer initiative called The Call? Even the call was a big yes to the Holy Spirit, because in the natural, when Lou had the vision, Lou Engel has been I've been in a covenant relationship with him for 30 years. We came out from the East Coast to California together, his family and my family. He's been a prophet to me, and I've been his apostle for over 20 years. And I remember when Lou went to the Promise Keepers gathering in 1997. How many men were there at Washington, D.C.? Okay. It was a historic gathering with over 1 million men that gathered in Washington, D.C. in 97. He saw prophetically that this was a partial fulfillment of Malachi chapter 4, 5, and 6. That God was turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and hearts of the children to the fathers. And he saw that the hearts of the fathers were turning, but what about the children? What about their hearts turning? So God spoke to him to mobilize young people to go to Washington, D.C. and have their hearts turned towards God the Father, first of all, but towards their parents and have reconciliation and forgiveness and generational reconciliation. So he was so jazzed about the word, he came to me immediately because he was on staff with me. He said, God spoke to me. We're to mobilize the young people in Washington, D.C., just like the Promise Keepers. Yeah, right. Because I said, you know, we're talking about Promise Keepers, a multi-million-dollar organization. Who are we? No one knows us. How can we mobilize young people in Washington, D.C.? And we knew how much it cost. We asked the Promise Keepers how much it cost for them to mobilize 1 million men in Washington, D.C. It cost them over $5 million. So if we want to do something comparable, we're talking about in the millions. And so I said, Lou, I think this is a vision from God, but you need to go with a major organization like Campus Crusade or YWAM or, Ron Luce, this major leader among the young people, and ask them to help you fulfill this vision. So he did. He went to every one of the major leaders and major youth organizations in America, and they all said, this is of God. But none of them wanted to touch it because of the costs involved. So in 1999, October, we knew it was of the Lord, but we had gone nowhere. And I remember I was speaking in San Diego at a Korean church, and I remember that night was just a very tender time for me because as I was worshiping, I made a fresh consecration to the Lord. I said, Lord, if someone else could pastor H Rock Church better than me, it's not a right, it's not an entitlement. I'm grateful that you allowed me to pastor this great church, and it's a wonderful church. But if someone else could do it better than me, fine, get someone else to be a pastor of that church. And at that time it was an 1,100 member church, and it was just a thriving apostolic center where we were hosting meetings and conferences. It's 1999, and so I said, let someone else pastor. Then I said, Lord, I give you the apostolic network I'm privileged to serve. Harvest International Ministry was just booming and was growing. I said, if someone else can do a better job as the apostolic leader of this network, Lord, it's not about me, it's all about you. And what a privilege it is to serve, but if you want me to do something else. And so I gave everything over to the Lord. It was just a fresh consecration. That was on Friday night. The next morning, at 6 o'clock in the morning, the Holy Spirit woke me up. And he said, did you really mean that prayer that you prayed last night? Now, how many know when God asks you a question, he already knows the answer and he knows what? It's not like he doesn't know. And I said, yeah, I did. He said, are you willing to lay down everything and serve your brother Lou and mobilize for the call? And I have to be I'm being real with you. Everything in my flesh said, no way I'm going to do that. I love pastoring. I love doing what I'm doing. But all of a sudden I saw myself just traveling raising money for an event, which I didn't want to do, and to organize and administrate a big event, which I'm not into. And, I don't mind speaking at it, but I don't want to be the one to organize it. And so when the Lord said that, I just said, my heart sang. I said, God, yes, if this is what you're saying, because he began to speak to me, he's your prophet, but the apostles have to flesh out the prophetic word. You're in covenant. So the next day was Sunday after the service, like we do many times often. We meet as a family once a week at least. And so I'm so grateful to have 4 adult children all living in Los Angeles, all part of the church and serving the church in some capacity. So I met with them and I said, kids, what do you think? Do you think God spoke to me that I'm to serve Lou with a call? Do you think I should just drop everything? And they said, absolutely, Dad. And I remember one of them, may have been Mary, said, Uncle Lou has served you all these years. I think it's time for you to serve him. And then I met with Lou that night after our Sunday night service, and I shared with him, I said, God spoke to me that I'm to drop everything and run with you and help you see this vision of bringing the young people to Washington, D.C. to pray and fast. He wept. He broke down and wept. He was so burdened about this. And the moment we came together into this covenant alignment, that's when all of a sudden we got the permit to meet in Washington, D.C. We had less than 1 year. And as you know, over 500,000 had gathered together on September 2nd, 2000. We raised $5 million for that event. We were totally in the black. Come on, let's thank the Lord for that. Saying yes to something that was absolutely crazy in the natural. But when the Holy Spirit speaks, see? And so that's why the prophetic is so important. That's why hearing his voice and knowing his will is so important. That's why, and why? I mean, why did God sovereignly orchestrate that way? Because he's after intimacy. He wants you to spend time with him. Kierkegaard says that the more I pray, the more I realize prayer is listening instead of talking. And he also went on to say God is constantly speaking, but the problem is we're not listening. He is constantly speaking to you. But the way you develop a sensitivity to the Holy Spirit is to obey the Holy Spirit. When you give expression to the impression, all of a sudden things begin to happen. And anything significant I've seen happen in our ministry and in our life is because we just said yes to the Holy Spirit. We just obeyed what the Spirit of God was saying and doing, even though in the natural it didn't make sense.